Dead by Dawn. The Evil Dead Rise. So this is another one I caught on the airplane. This was on the way out to Portland, Oregon. And timing seasonally means you're getting the review now. So, yeah. I probably wouldn't have sought this one out otherwise. Not that I don't like The Evil Dead. I do. But I have taken note that basically anytime The Evil Dead gets approached or is noted as an influence by other people, basically anytime it's not Sam Raimi doing it, there's a heavy emphasis on the more brutal aspects of The Evil Dead, which have been there from the very beginning. But, there's a reason that the franchise turned into an overt comedy. And I'm not saying that's automatically better. I honestly didn't quite click with the Ash versus the Evil Dead TV show when I tried to watch it. I might try and give that another crack, but I only got a couple episodes in. I'm like, this is fine. It's fun. But that second movie is gold. And I do like Army of Darkness, goofy as it is. But the remake, remake, not really remake, the thing that happened a little while back, I didn't love. I think partially because there was so much emphasis on the gore and the viscera of it. And seeing the trailers for this led me to believe that this might be going for kind of the same thing. And it kind of is, but it also kind of worked for me. Definitely much more than I was expecting it to. So there's a couple things that this does that are actually quite impressive. The first is that this is, to my knowledge at least, the first Evil Dead movie that is not in an isolated location. It's not in a cabin in the woods or thrown back to medieval times in the case of Army of Darkness, if you still want to count that. It counts in the chronology, but like calling it an Evil Dead movie is a little bit... Anyways, that's a different conversation. This one takes place in an apartment in a city, and yet feels just as cut off and isolated as any cabin in the wood has ever felt. That's pretty impressive. And I was going to say there's no fodder in this. That's not true. There is. But the core group, you're really going to get to know these people. And it really allows at the very least, the primary people who get possessed, it lingers on them, especially the first character who gets possessed. It's unsettling watching this person become a monster and to see how hard it is on everyone else present, because this is a family we're talking about, see what's going on and not know how to deal with it, not know how to fix it, deal with the distinct possibility that this can't be fixed. It's rough. It's a rough ride of a movie. And part of why it's sort of surprising to me that I like this as much as I did is because if you've hung around my channels enough, this one and the main one, Council of Geeks, I tend to take issue with what I consider to be unnecessary cruelty. The thing is, and I think sometimes people misunderstand this, it's not unnecessary cruelty being committed by characters, because that doesn't always, but can serve a purpose narratively. It's unnecessary cruelty committed by the narrative. That's what tends to bother me. And unnecessary isn't even the right term. Casual and callous cruelty angers me. And if you think that's only in horror franchises, it's not. It was actually a very consistent complaint I had about the Chibnall era of Doctor Who, It was a fairly big hang up that I had in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The casual disposal of living characters in a way that feels both unnecessary and unacknowledged and didn't need to be there, and you didn't even give it weight bothers me. So while this movie is cruel in the sense that what happens to the characters is cruel and difficult to watch, it's not superfluous and it's not casual. There is weight given to the acts that happen here. The things that happen to these people, it's not done casually or thoughtlessly. And in my opinion, at least, it's not done in excess of what serves the mood, tone, aims, and narrative that are on display. That's in slight contrast to the Evil Dead, I'm going to call it a remake, the Evil Dead remake, which was still good, but didn't quite land right for me because broadly speaking, it was kind of in a similar vein to this, but it took the physical brutalizing of characters a couple of steps further than this does. And in my mind, that's where that one crosses over into cruelty. The general notion of what was happening to everybody, I mean, that's the story. That's just what this is. But the degree to which it was taken started to make it feel cruel because, like, this doesn't need to be to this level. If you want another comparison, some things that happened in Game of Thrones, I think particularly in regards to Sansa and Ramsay Bolton, we as an audience did not need to be shown what happened, what he did to her. To show us exactly what happened is an excessive cruelty to both the character of Sansa and to the audience, because we know the kind of guy Ramsay is. We know the kind of thing that he is liable to do. All you had to make clear was that he was alone in a room for the night with her, and everything else can be brought across in terms of the impact on her just through characterization going forward. You do not need to show this, and it felt cruel when it did. And that's the kind of cruelty that, at least I think, actually isn't in this movie. Now, that's not me saying that this is light and cheery and a gentle horror movie. It's not. It's visceral. It's goopy. It's harsh. It's gross, frankly. But again, in a way that feels very Raimi. I think that's another thing about the reboot. The reboot felt gross. It had a little bit of the Raimi flair, but it felt a little bit more gross in the way that, like, Saw is gross. The way Hostel is gross. This feels gross in the way Raimi is gross. So this feels like, tonally, and in a way that's kind of hard to pinpoint, this feels a little bit truer to The Evil Dead. And there's also just a bunch of great little touches. I love the design on the book. In this one, there's actually a line, something about there being 3 books, implying that this actually could be in continuity shared with the Evil Dead reboot and the original. These are different versions of the same book, but like in this one, the look of the book is really cool and very unsettling, as it should be. The performances by the possessed people are great. Like, it is good, strong, unsettling, deeply unsettling stuff. And there is a sense of unfairness to what's going on, but that's, again, kind of the point. These powers, these energies, these demonic forces are unfair and cruel. And thus, so is the film, to a fair degree. There's a lot of little nods to the earlier films, little visual moments, little lines here and there. They're integrated pretty smoothly. There was really only one that stood out. It's a repeat of a bit from Evil Dead 2 involving an eyeball. And if you've seen Evil Dead 2, you'll recognize it immediately. And like in Evil Dead 2, it works because it's a little bit silly, a little bit goofy. But that movie is a little bit goofy. It happens here again, and it sits a little bit more awkwardly because this movie's not as goofy. But other than that one, I felt like the nods to the original were integrated really, really well. And pretty seamlessly. And like this works as a standalone. You do not have to have seen anything else Evil Dead related at all. This 100% works on its own. If I was going to issue any complaints, I do think that, actually, again, a little bit similarly to the reboot, it escalates a little further than it needs to by the end. Because to me, the escalation is just these things, the threat of them getting closer and closer, and we don't know how our remaining surviving characters are going to get away. That to me is enough escalation. But there's and I'm not going to spoil what it is because this movie came out this year, and I don't know how many people have seen it. But this movie does escalate it a little bit further in a way that it works, but I don't think it needed. It's a little bit of over-egging the pudding. The reboot had that as well. Sort of its final confrontation was a massive escalation that I think was bigger than the movie could actually support. So this kind of also does that, although I think it was more egregious in the reboot than here. Like, I feel like they could have dialed it back a little, and in some ways it feels a little bit like a functional necessity of the plot, because like there's a thing that happens, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. There's a thing that happens that very clearly escalates the situation, but at the same time also simplifies the situation, and as a practical matter, narratively, actually makes it easier for the remaining heroes to attempt to resolve it. So it feels like something that was... It feels like the escalation is there to kind of paper over what might have been done to actually try and simplify things a little bit as it got on the back end. I don't know. It's hard to explain without spoilers. Maybe if somebody wants to ask for clarification in the comments, I'll reply to that. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. But for the most part, like, this is good. And I would say definitely if you want a scary take, like legitimately scary take, on the Evil Dead concept, on this demonic possession angle, and not The Exorcist, but like much more tactile and visceral and rough, then I'd say this is the best version of it. I think this is better than the remake, and I think this is better than the first Evil Dead movie. I don't think it's better than Evil Dead 2, but again, you get to Evil Dead 2 and you are dealing with a pretty close to a 50-50 balance between the horror and the comedy. This one, I would say, is way more in line with the original Evil Dead and with the reboot, and I think it's better than both of them. So, Evil Dead Rise. Is it Rise or Rises? I think it's Rise. Whatever it is. What'd you think of this one? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, and even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. I can talk. Tried to say it like fancy, and it got caught in my throat. Whatever. All those things help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. Shout out to the patrons who help make this possible. In particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabilax the Poodle, Robin Powell, T. Love, Tracy Scrappett, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, and Rosalind Bennett. There's being able to hear me try and pronounce your name, plus a whole bunch of other rewards in the Patreon. You can check out the tiers, but if you're already on the list, thank you so much.